Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir. Palantir stock is red today. It's been a red day that we have not had in a long time, down almost 10% on the day. So today we're going to discuss why it's red, what's going on, and what possibly could have caused the stock to drop almost 10% in a day. Number two, Alex Karp was at the Ronald Reagan Library over the weekend, and he gave a 13-minute discussion kind of speech with a lot of other panelists. So we're going to discuss that. One thing that he said I thought was really interesting that speaks to where Palantir is going in terms of their defense tech ambitions. And I want to play that clip for you all. And then Shyam Sankar on Friday also was at the Ronald Reagan Library, and he had 5 minutes of an interview. And he said some really interesting things that I think are going to implicate AIP's growth and are also going to implicate Palantir's ties with Israel. So we're going to talk about that. We got a jam-packed day, a lot to get into. It's a bloody red day. Let's get into it. All right, first thing we'll talk about is the stock. Obviously, stock is down pretty badly today. So down 9% on the day, 9.23%, and down another 0.33% after hours. Very close to being down 10% on the day. Why is this happening? The macro in general today was kind of flat, as you can see. I mean, the S&P 500 was down 0.52%, so we were down on the S&P and some of the indices. Some stocks were red, some stocks were green. Big tech is starting to get a little bit more red because obviously they've had a phenomenal year, and that's starting to rotate to some of the small caps, mid caps. But Palantir was down pretty aggressively today on the 10%. Now, the conventional argument you can make is that, look, Palantir has run up, 188% year to date, so obviously it's time for a little bit of a pullback, right? Because you can't go up that high and just keep sustaining those momentums. And that's fine. I'm there to hear that, but 10% is a lot, 10% is a lot. You could expect 2, 3, 4%. All right, 5%, 6%, 10% is like there is some selling pressure that's going on. And I think it's important to investigate why that selling pressure is happening. Here's the one thing I found today from Barron's. I don't think this article is what necessarily caused the collapse. I have my own theory on that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this is an article that I did think from Adam Clark on December 4th today. Came out at 10:20, started really circulating around the interwebs and got some people thinking about Palantir. So let's read a little bit from this. The worries for Palantir were highlighted by a presentation given by U.S. Army officials last week. Comments made in the presentation suggested there might be friction between the Army and Palantir over data ownership as part of the company's 4-year, $458 million contract for the Army data platform, according to William Blair analyst Louis DePalma. Louis has historically been pretty bearish on Palantir, and he's covered them for the past couple of years. The contract started in December 2019 and is set to end within weeks. De Parma writes in a research note, the tone of the comments and the plan to maximize the use of open source vendors provides a strong indication that Palantir's renewal contract will be significantly less than the original $458 million. De Palma said it seemed likely the Army would give Palantir a 2-year contract and build a future system with multiple vendors, thus reducing its $116 million per revenue stream over the medium term, and Palantir did not respond to comment. Now, De Palma also says that he has an underperform rating on the stock, noting shares currently trade at 125 times its forecast 2023 free cash flow, and arguing that there is potential for that to compress to the mid-30s multiple going into 2024. And the competitive pressures around defense contracts, which is what this entire research note was about, is the reason why he thinks there's going to be some compression on the multiple. So to summarize that, Louis De Palma attended some research Army presentation, or he has sources that attended that research Army presentation, and wrote a note today basically saying that the Army is looking towards providing open source technology, which means they're going to be procuring from vendors that create that open source technology that are not Palantir, or that even if it includes Palantir, it doesn't include the exclusivity that Palantir had back in 2019 when they secured almost $500 million from the Army for this specific type of data integration technology. I don't know exactly what contract he's talking about here, but he's talking about a general Army contract that Palantir has gotten in 2019 that's expiring in the next couple of weeks. And could that be the reason why the stock is down 10%? Maybe. I think the one thing to Louis' credit here is that he is making the point that as the government starts procuring more technology vendors, if those technology vendors are quote-unquote open source versus closed source like a Palantir system would be, then maybe that would be something where it would be cheaper for the government, or they just wouldn't need to rely on one vendor like historically they have on Palantir in this specific type of contract. And as a result of that, the competition becomes higher, and Palantir is not able to get those lucrative government deals. $458 million over 4 years is a lot of money. They wouldn't be able to get that because the government is, getting that money from somewhere else. Now, in general, I think while that may be true, we really got to see some proof of that. Down 10% on the speculation of that, that's fine, sure. The market is the market, but Palantir software is incredibly critical. I mean, let us not forget how much money the government is putting into JADC2, which I did an interview with someone. I'll link in the description. It was an hour-long interview. He broke down the entire thesis around the government business for Palantir. That really is the moat. A lot of people say it's a drag on the company. The reason 60% of the revenue is government, 40% is commercial, is because that government revenue is so sticky. And when you get in, you kind of get in for a while. So there's so many billions of dollars being spent in the government over the next 10 years, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. We talked on the show a couple of weeks ago. One of the head guys on the implementation team for Biden's AI safety protocols is at Palantir. He's one of the heads of AI technology at Palantir. So it's like, I wouldn't really struggle to believe that their moat in the U.S. government business in particular is weakening. In fact, I think it's getting stronger and stronger. However, a particular contract that De Palma is talking about here might not be won by them to the extent that it was a couple years ago, which potentially could signal the perception to the market, which is, the algorithms that are trading the stock all day, that Palantir is not in a prime position to be able to grab government contracts. I personally don't believe that. I would need to see more evidence of that, but this research notes that came out could be a reason for why, the market felt a little scared for why Palantir was down. So that's kind of the base reason that came out today. Now, outside of that, in general, when I woke up and I saw Palantir was red, and then over the next couple of hours, Palantir got really red, my first thought was, this is an institution. 9% on the day is not retail. Retail is not selling after they bought at 15 and they got their gains, I don't think. And I don't think retail is selling after they bought at 21 and they're bag holding at 19. Like, I even if both of those things could happen, I just don't think at the level of 9% on a stock that has 2 billion shares outstanding, I don't think that's retail. I think some institutional investors decided, you know what, we got to take our profits. It is December. We can probably get back in at a cheaper price. There are many analysts across the entire world that believe Palantir is fundamentally overvalued simply because of the multiple, the stretch, the fact that the growth's not there. The story is there, which is why you'd be willing to pay for that growth. But if the growth is not there, there is obviously a reason for why people would want to sell the stock and take some gains and then get back in when multiples become a little bit more realistic based on the nature of the growth. That's totally fine. The problem is, obviously, if the stock moons, then it's hard to get back in, and that's the existential conflict of trying to time these with tech stocks. But one could argue an institutional investor is like, look, we bought in at 15, 12, we're up massively. We want to redistribute to some of our partners at the fund. We want to make sure that our clients are well taken care of going into the end of the year. And quite frankly, we have no idea what's going to happen in 2024. I believe it will be a risk-on bull market, but there's a lot of ways I could be wrong. And if that's the case, Palantir is just not going to be able to survive at $20. Like, it's going to be very difficult in a risk-off environment for Palantir to be able to achieve those multiples, especially because their peers are not going to be able to achieve those multiples as well. So from that perspective, there is an argument, I think, that institutional investors got up and they sold the stock and took some of their gains. I don't think you move 9% in a day from retail. Like, I just don't think it happens on a stock like Palantir. I mean, it can compound 1 or 2%, but 9%. Almost 10%, right? 9.5%. I think that's big money deciding that they're going to take some profits, which is reasonable. The stock's up 215% year to date. Like, you expect that to happen. My guess now is, where can Palantir capitulate going into the end of the year? Do we go back down to the 14-15 range, or do we get to stay in the 17-18, which is still phenomenal price action for the year going into the end of the year if we can stay at that level? So we will ultimately see what happens. Let me know in the comments if you are buying the dip on Palantir, 10% down on the day. We'll see what happens going forward, but the main reasons are macro was a little iffy today, and some stocks fell, Palantir being one of them. Second of all, I think institutional investors decided first week of trading in December, let's take some profits. And then third, this research note that came out saying that Palantir doesn't have the strongest moat in the U.S. government space, or that their moat may be threatened. That is also a reason that all came together for why Palantir could be down on the day. All right, let's move on to a clip we have from Palantir's Alex Karp at the Ronald Reagan Library. This was really interesting. This was the National Defense Forum this past weekend, and I have a Twitter account called DailyPalantir that you may not know about. I run it with another friend of mine named Andrew, and it's basically a media company around Palantir. That Twitter account had 9,700 followers on Saturday morning. Today it has 10,500 followers, so it increased a lot, about 700-800 followers. And the reason for that is because this clip that we posted got 600,000 views, 570,000 right now. And the reason it got 570,000 views is because Bill freaking Ackman, out of all people who has 900,000 followers on Twitter, retweeted this tweet from Daily Palantir. So I'm going to let you guys see this and let me know your thoughts on what you think of what Karp said. I thought it was kind of similar to Elon's GFY moment that he had at the New York Times Deal Book Conference this past week. And then we'll analyze what he had to say. But it was good enough to get Bill Ackman, who's a very big name in the finance world, to retweet this tweet from a very little account about Palantir and expose this to hundreds of thousands of new people.
It's very hard to see the future. I think first of all, there were unfortunately way too many people on October 7th who were happy. And we have to acknowledge we have a huge problem in the Western world with anti-Semitism. And we cannot, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, but a larger portion of it is than we realized. And we have to call it out. And I'm one of the largest donors to the Democratic Party, and quite frankly, I'm calling it out and I'm giving to Republicans, if you keep up with this behavior, I'm going to change. A lot of people like me are going to change. We have to really call this out. It is completely beyond the bounds. That's before you get to the Israel thing. Most Americans, again, most Americans who are not elite institutions, see this battle for what it is. You see a one side which is powered by terrorism, that is using terrorist means, and that will expand its footprint to the West if it's not pushed back. And I am not a legislator, but I am running one of the coolest companies in the world, and I'm telling young people, you are breathing the vapors of a dangerous, new, fake, and self-destructive religion when you are sitting at your elite school pretending because you watched TikTok twice and got an A+ on some crazy paper because your professor couldn't get a job anywhere else, that you actually understand the world. And you're not welcome at my company.
Yeah.
This was an epic moment. And the reason it was an epic moment was for a couple of reasons. Number one is some Palantir employees that were at the event, they actually tweeted that the electricity in the room was dynamic. People could feel the energy. People could understand how much Karp was trying to resonate with what is going on in the world. And so there was a certain level of excitement when they were listening to Karp speak. So that was one thing that was really good from him speaking at the Defense Forum. The second thing is he's talking about the broader ecosystem around how we have this culture in society, particularly in the West, where we're glorifying what Hamas did on October 7th. Now, you can have legitimate critiques of the Israeli government, but for people in the West to be like, it's a great thing for what Hamas did, it's just insane. It is. And what Karp is saying is that we are one of three public companies, them, Anduril, and from getting one other company that has publicly said, we support Israel. And it's because of the fact that there is a lot more anti-Semitism in the United States and in the West, and we take for granted the Western values and freedoms we have that really don't exist in other parts of the world, and we're cheering on barbaric acts that make absolutely no sense. So Karp was unapologetic about this. I think it made a lot of sense. He was also pointing to the fact that there's these elite universities that think they have these ideological understandings of the world, when in reality they are so detached from what's going on in the world. On your MacBook saying you hate capitalism, shut the hell up, was basically what Karp was trying to say. And as a result of that, his argument was that a lot of these people don't really know what's going on in the real world. And the broader macro point is that the United States, which is what he talked about at this conference, need to spend more money on defense tech, because the idea that China's not going to catch up, the idea that Russia's not going to catch up, the idea that we have an advantage in software and that we can only spend a couple of percentage points of our defense budget on software because we think that guns matter more than the actual technology, the AI that is fueling the capacity for those guns to even be meaningful in the first place when it comes to targeting. There is a very unique moment in time we are seeing with defense tech finally getting the funding it needs from the private sector at the tunes of billions of dollars per year into these startups, and geopolitically, NATO countries, Western countries recognizing, hey, we should probably protect our sovereignty and defend these Western values and actually allocate to defense resources, versus be like, oh no, that's an evil thing to do, to have technology that helps you defend the nature of your sovereignty as an independent state. And Ukraine is proving this, Israel, Hamas is proving this, eventually China, Taiwan is probably going to prove this. And so I think Karp is speaking to a larger point, especially for that audience that is at the Reagan Defense Forum. That is a very specific audience. There's a lot of decision makers there that are wanting to hear the message that Karp said. It's the message I think most of us agree with as shareholders, and he delivered. And he delivered in a way that got a lot of people to be excited. And Bill Ackman retweeted the clip, so 600,000 people that might have not known about Palantir got to see their CEO talk for the best 1 minute that he could possibly have talked at that conference. So not bad. Thanks, Bill Ackman. And I think hopefully you guys enjoyed that clip. All right, last thing I'm going to do is share 5 minutes of Shyam Sankar talking on CNBC on Friday. I'm going to let it play. If you already watched it, then you don't have to watch it, and you can just skip to the chapter where I analyze it. If you haven't watched it yet, here's 5 minutes Shyam Sankar on CNBC talking about what's going on in the world of Palantir.
Joining me here exclusively at the Reagan National Defense Forum, Shyam Sankar, CTO of Palantir Technologies, which is up more than 215% since the start of the year. Shyam, it's really good to have you here with me. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Morgan.
You do have technology deployed in Ukraine. You also work very closely with Department of Defense here in the U.S. and other government agencies. Is your software being deployed to Israel, too?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have come to Reagan from Tel Aviv. So we are proud, we've been unequivocal in our support for Israel and their right to defend themselves against these barbaric attacks. And we've worked in Israel since at least 2014.
Okay. I mean, we talk a lot about demand for hardware and weapons and munition stockpiling, et cetera. Are we seeing the same sort of demand for software and technologies?
Yeah, the need to make better decisions quicker, that are more precise, more protective of civilians, that enable you to take the advantage over the adversary has never been more clear. We've seen that play out on the battlefield of Ukraine and how asymmetric that capability can be. We're seeing it play out in totally different domains like Israel now, and there are a lot of lessons here that I think are going to apply as we think about the Pacific theater.
Okay, lessons like some examples?
How are you going to fight in a coalition environment? You think about, of course, Israel has to do so much, but we're supporting not only Israel, but also her allies. How are allies involved? There's the logistics and supply chain element of this, but there's also the broader collaboration, situational awareness, the evacuation of non-combatants. We have to bring all of those things that we really started learning since Afghanistan to bear in the next theaters that provide geopolitical challenge for us.
And of course, Palantir is a dual-use technology company, really one of the first ones to the public market. So you work with government. You also work with commercial and private sector as well. And you're also one of those companies that has been working on developing and deploying AI for quite a number of years now. So as other companies are thinking about investments, you're already monetizing your investments. These AIP boot camps that were talked about in the third quarter earnings, these artificial intelligence platform boot camps, I think there had been an expectation that maybe you would sign on 140 companies in the month of November to these boot camps. I guess walk me through what they are and how many people, how many companies have shown interest.
Yeah, so these boot camps, we've rebuilt our entire go-to-market around it because it's really this magical experience where you get your hands on the keyboard for 8 hours and you leave that experience with a production-ready use case. And with even more than that, a deep and intuitive understanding of how do you apply this technology to get real results. More than a proof of concept, actual proof that you can take to your enterprise and get results. And so this has been a profound change for us. And we ended November, we thought we'd do 140. We did it for 200 organizations. We're on track this year to serve 325 organizations with boot camps. And we've really focused on commercial so far this year, particularly focused on U.S. commercial. Next year and into December here, we're really going to be bringing this to the U.S. government as well.
And we saw it in the third quarter reaccelerate growth on the commercial side. It also, I would imagine, lowers your marketing costs and creates a stickier environment in terms of more companies coming on board. Is that what you're continuing to see?
We're continuing to see that. I think one of the most profound effects of, let's call it 2023, the year of reinvention around ChatGPT, is the expectation that software is actually going to work and the accountability that's around that. So people want to leave with 8 hours of effort realizing they can put something in production.
I do want to talk to you about something else that is on your website, but I don't know that it has been discussed very much publicly yet, and that is Palantir Web Government Services. Is this a new business strategy for Palantir? Yeah,
the idea is, we were one of the first defense tech companies. We spent 20 years kind of building this wormhole between modern American software and the Defense Department. And there's not just your product. There's all of this software infrastructure you need just to get to the starting line when you're dealing with an institution like the DoD. How do you get on their networks? How do you deal with accreditation? How do you get to data? We now have $100 billion of capital deployed through VCs, hundreds of new entrants in this category, which is so exciting. I want to help them succeed. And uniquely, Palantir has spent the last 20 years banging our head against the wall, needing to develop technologies that I know they're going to need to get to the starting line. And so Palantir Government Web Services is really about bringing that to them, helping them succeed faster, bend the revenue curve, bend the cost curve, get to that next round and survive the valley of death.
I mentioned the fact that you're already realizing returns on all of your AI investments and software investments. You've had 4 quarters of profitability. You're now eligible for possible entry into the S&P 500. Are you expecting that? Are you gaming that out? What would that mean for the company?
I think it's one of the things you can't really have expectations around. But what I think it would mean for the company, and actually more importantly, the broader defense tech ecosystem, it's been 45 years since an actual defense company, one not born out of mergers and spin-outs and other financial engineering, but a new venture formation has been added to the S&P 500. The primes They were added on March 4th, 1957, which is the year that the indice was created. So that doesn't feel like American dynamism to me. I think it feels more like the sclerotic nature of European capital markets. And I think we should bring the best of America to this. And I hope we would be the first of many of these hundreds of defense companies that have an opportunity to participate.
A couple things I thought Shyam said that were really interesting in that clip. Two things I want to go over. Number one, Palantir is working with Israel. So he came to California at the Ronald Reagan Library from Tel Aviv. Obviously, if you come on a flight from Tel Aviv, that means he was speaking with senior officials. Palantir has been in Tel Aviv since 2014. He was also talking to them, discussing some of the problems going on, and probably discussing what correlation Palantir could have working with them in any meaningful capacity. So don't really know what the nature of the work is, but we definitely know there is a link between Palantir and Israel. And if the CTO of Palantir is flying from Israel, it's probably because he was speaking to some high up officials and potentially getting ready to give them their software in some capacity. Number two is AIP boot camps. So he said more than 325 organizations have already received some level of a boot camp. That's really interesting because if the conversion on that starts to get higher and they scale the output of the boot camps, remember at the Q3 earnings, Karp said that scale is not a problem of dollars. It's a problem of talent. They have the money to be able to execute the boot camps. The question is, do they have the talent in place to actually be able to go and do the boot camps themselves? That AIP is going to do well, right? Like these boot camps, I'm convinced, are the right go-to-market strategy. I think the entire company is rounded around this culture of the boot camps. Remember why boot camps are so important? Boot camps are product focused, and product focus really matters for a company that doesn't have a sales force. The reason I love the bootcamp strategy is because Palantir is a product-oriented company, and so they're literally selling the product via a product-oriented go-to-market, right? The bootcamp is giving customers the product, not taking them to a steak dinner or showing them a PowerPoint. It's like, hey, here's the product. You like it, keep it for a couple months, then let us know if you want it. And it's like, as a customer, you just got to be impressed. And so 325 organizations got the boot camps. If they can start scaling that 10 to 20% month over month in terms of output of boot camps and scale conversion from 5 to 10%, we are going to get thousands of clients. And I don't think it's going to happen in 2024, but it's going to start to happen, and it could potentially be geometric or exponential in terms of the rate of adoption. It all depends on how valuable AIP is to these clients and how well they're adopting the strategies that are being shown to them in boot camps and the products that are being shown to them, to the point where they realize, you know what, we just need to buy the entire thing. If AI in general in the enterprise and that spend is increasing, Dan Ives was on the channel the other day. I'll play a clip from him in tomorrow's episode where he was talking about, he was on my channel on Friday. He was talking about the people that he discusses around tech stocks and innovation, and he travels all across the world, are saying that Palantir is in the 1 to 5 names that are at the top of the list when it comes to being able to figure out how to implement enterprise AI throughout the entire company and organization. And, you know, this is someone I would tend to trust. Dan Ives has his ear to the crowd when it comes to learning about tech stocks and what's going on at the level of the CIOs, the chief information officers of these big organizations. So if that's the case, if Palantir is already, you know, in the mouth of a lot of these people, they're talking about Palantir, thinking about Palantir, and then they go to a boot camp, they're already excited about the product, already excited about the company. Now they get to see the boot camp and they're like, oh, this is really good. We really want to use this. I think the conversion on that can be strong. We're just going to need, you know, the next 6 to 8 months to see that data and then see what ends up happening with those customers. But overall, I thought it was some really good insights by Shyam Sankar. All right, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Let me know what you think about Palantir. And also, here's the question of the day. Do you think Bill Ackman would ever buy Palantir? He's more of a consumer-focused investor, Lowe's, Hilton, Google, Chipotle, but he obviously believes in Alex Karp's philosophy, and he retweeted that tweet for a reason. Is there ever a world where you could see Bill Ackman owning a significant portion of Palantir and holding it for a long time? Because if he buys a company, he'll hold it for a long time. Let me know. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.